Hey, what's up guys, OSG back with the next episode of the Commodore 64 years. We've reached 1988, and if you thought 1987 was stacked, this year somehow manages to keep the momentum going. By now the Commodore 64 was a veteran machine. The 16-bit era was knocking on the door, but developers clearly weren't done with the bread bin just yet. We're talking deeper RPGs, bigger action games, stronger arcade conversions, and some absolute all-time classics. And like I've said in the last few episodes, we're sticking with 20 games per year from here on out, because cutting this list any further would just be criminal. So let's get into it, counting down the 20 best Commodore 64 games of 1988 in order of greatness. Kicking things off at number 20 is Power at Sea. This was a serious Near East strategy game. Slow, methodical and very detail heavy. Definitely not an arcade experience. You had to think, plan and commit to long-term decisions. Not the most flashy title of the year, but if you were into simulations and military strategy, this was right up your alley. At 19 we've got Rocket Ranger. Cinemaware once again went big on presentation. Cinematic cutscenes, dramatic music and that pulpy 1930s sci-fi vibe. Jetpacks, Nazis, moon missions. It's completely over the top. Gameplay wise it could be a little uneven, but visually and stylistically pure late 80s ambition. At 18 is Questron 2, a classic top-down RPG with a huge world to explore and a lot of grinding to survive. It wasn't the most welcoming game, but it rewarded patience. SSI were really carving out their niche with hardcore role-playing titles, and this was another solid entry for serious RPG fans. In 17th is Salamander. Fast, brutal and very arcade. This horizontal shooter brought that Konami intensity to the C64. It's tough, like really tough, but the action is relentless. Not the deepest game of the year, but if you wanted pure reflex-based chaos, Salamander delivered. At 16th we've got Bard's Tale 3. By this point the series was refined and confident. Massive dungeons, complex party management and serious time investment required. It wasn't revolutionary compared to the first games, but as a continuation of one of the C64's biggest RPG franchises, it absolutely deserves its place on this list. At 15th is Mars Saga, a sci-fi RPG that doesn't get talked about as much as it should. Great atmosphere, solid combat and that late 80s EA polish. It felt different from the usual fantasy settings, and that helped it stand out in a year packed with role-playing games, as you will see in this list. At 14th we've got Times of Law. Origin Systems streamlined the RPG formula here, making something more accessible but still deep. It had a big world, real-time combat and a sense of adventure that pulled you in. Not as massive as Ultima, but definitely easier to jump into. At 13th is Armalite. Now visually this is one of the most impressive shooters on the C64. Huge sprites, smooth scrolling and massive bosses. Thalamus really pushed the machine hard here. It doesn't have in-game music driving the action, but honestly it doesn't need it. The focus is on pure gameplay, tight controls, tough difficulty and screen-filling chaos. It's one of those games that makes you sit up a bit straighter when you play it. At 12 we've got Emlyn Hughes International Soccer. This was one of the best football games available on the C64 at the time. Fast, responsive and surprisingly tactical. It didn't overcomplicate things, it just played well, and that goes a long way. Just missing out on the top 10 is Katakis. Yes, heavily inspired by R-Type. We all know that story, but this is seriously an impressive shooter on its own right. The scrolling is smooth, the enemy design is great, and the soundtrack is absolutely brilliant. It really adds to the atmosphere and gives the whole game that arcade intensity. Inspired or not, Katakis is a top tier C64 shooter. Cracking into the top 10 is Samurai Warrior, The Battles of Usagi Yojimbo. This one is absolutely gorgeous. Super colourful cartoon style graphics, honestly one of the nicest looking games on the C64. The character animation and backgrounds, the whole comic book feel, it just pops off the screen. It's more action focused than people sometimes remember, and while it's not the easiest game in the world, visually it's a real showcase title. One of those games you just load up to admire. At 9 is Legend of Black Silver, a big open RPG experience with loads of exploration. Epics usually leaned into sports and action, so seeing them deliver a deep fantasy world like this was interesting. It could be tough and occasionally unforgiving, but it had scale and that mattered. At 8 we've got MicroProse Soccer, and let's be honest, this was the best football game on the C64 by a clear mile. Fast, smooth, responsive and just incredibly playable. It nailed that perfect balance between arcade fun and tactical control. You could pick it up quickly, but there was real depth once you got good at it. If you had a C64 and liked football, this was the one. Number 7 is Neuromancer. Based on the William Gibson novel, this was cyberpunk before cyberpunk was mainstream. Hacking, dialogue choices, digital worlds, it felt futuristic. It demanded patience, but the atmosphere and world building were on another level. At 6 is Red Storm Rising, another MicroProse heavyweight. It's a tense submarine simulation that had strategic depth and serious realism. If you like silent service, then this was a natural evolution, deep, immersive and absolutely not casual. Cracking the top 5 is Pool of Radiance, a licensed Dungeons & Dragons RPG done properly. Tactical combat, character progression and that classic fantasy vibe. This was a big deal at the time and it helped cement SSI as a powerhouse in computer role-playing games. At 4 we've got Ultima V. Huge world, deep morality system, complex storylines. This wasn't just an RPG, it felt like a living world. Origin were pushing the storytelling forward here and the ambition shows. At 3 is Wasteland. This is a post-apocalyptic RPG before Fallout was even a thought. Dark, open-ended and full of player choice. This was mature, complex and ahead of its time. One of the most important RPGs of the entire decade. Runner-up is Zak McKracken and the Alien Mindbenders. This is a classic Lucasfilm point-and-click adventure with clever puzzles, witty dialogues and globe-trotting madness. It didn't take itself too seriously, and that charm made it incredibly memorable. Just misses the top spot, but only just. And at number 1 is Last Ninja 2. I've said it before and I'll say it again, this is the best game I've ever completed. Not just because of the gameplay, but because of the total experience. The atmosphere, the music, the setting, the challenge, it all comes together into something bigger than just a game. When you finish Last Ninja 2, you feel fulfilled, like you've genuinely achieved something. It's stylish, ambitious and technically impressive and completely unforgettable, especially with that soundtrack. For me, it's more than a game, it's a complete experience and a very deserved number 1 for 1988. And that wraps up 1988, another massive year for the Commodore 64. Even with newer hardware starting to appear, the C64 was still delivering heavy hitters. RPGs were deeper, action games were sharper, and the developers clearly knew how to squeeze every last drop out of the machine. If you are enjoying the series, make sure you like and subscribe and share it around. And if you would like to support the channel like these great guys going up the screen right now, head on over to my Patreon where you can pledge for as little as $1. That will get you perks like your name in the C64 crack drawer, end credits, video requests, giveaways and more in the future. Till next time, this is OSG signing out.